Just me, a place to be me, where you get to experience life. 'Cause life is a journey, not a guided tour. If you want the rainbow, you have to go through the rain. Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us today. And welcome to the first week of taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself. And for the month of April, we're going to be talking about stress awareness. And this week is titled Permission to Put Yourself First. And so we're going to be talking about different things that support the balancing of the body, the mind, and yourself. And my name is Sasha Giles. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I have with me.
And I'm Sharina Smith, and once again, thanks for joining us for this first episode in our month-long journey into what it truly means to take care of yourself while still showing up in the roles that we all hold, because we have a whole lot of roles that we
Yes,
hold.
yes. So we're going to be diving into the foundation of all that is self prioritization. We're going to be unpacking and putting ourselves first and why this isn't selfish, but it is, in fact, essential.
So when you think of the word selfish, putting ourselves first, it's almost like people see that as something negative, especially against women, moms, caregivers, people who are expected to pour from an empty cup all day, every day. So we're always pouring into others. But when it comes to taking care of ourselves, sometimes we feel kind of guilty as it relates to that.
Absolutely. But the truth is that prioritizing yourself means that you're respecting your capacity, your time, and your health. And it's not necessarily selfish, it's for survival. It's in order to keep you going, you continuing to care for others, you continuing to make it in and day out. And that's not selfish, that's actually wisdom.
Mm. That is true. But, let's think about it. Let's think about our cell phones and how we're going to compare our cell phones, how we treat ourselves. And what happens to a cell phone after you use it over and over again? What happens to the battery? It constantly decreases. It says you have 5% left, and then you have 1% left. And so if you don't recharge, eventually the cell phone it's not going to work anymore. It's not going to
Mhm.
be useful.
Right, right. It's like you keep ignoring. So think of some of these symptoms as your warning signs for your low battery. If you are really irritable, and maybe that your patience is not as long as it is when you have better sleep. Think about if you are irritable and your patience isn't as long as if you had eaten a meal today. Think about if excuse me, if you're sad or if you're trying to withdrawing away from people. Those are all and can be those low battery warning signs that our body is telling us. Or if we're tired, even though we've had a good amount of sleep, we still wake up and we're tired. If think of those as your low warning signs, your low battery warning signs. Um, and we have to keep in mind that if we ignore those low warning signs, those low battery warning signs, then we're ignoring our self care. We're ignoring what we need. We're not charging ourselves into the wall socket. We're just ignoring it. And so self care is our ability to charge ourselves, charge our phones into the wall socket and get that energy again.
So why do we feel guilty with self-care? Because what you're saying is that we are needing to recharge. Because if we don't recharge, we're not good to ourselves, so we're not good to anyone else. So there are times when we feel guilty.
Hmm.
And what happens is, even when we want to prioritize ourselves, that guilt continues to increase.
Yes. Yes. So many of us have grown up with messages like good people sacrifice, or a real mom always puts her children first. Um, and I can remember some of these things where I saw my mom work at least two jobs. Growing up, and I would see her come home and she would sit on the couch. And I actually had a conversation with her yesterday about this. How she said, Sasha, you need to rest because I have some low vitamin D issues going on. She's like, Sasha, you need to rest. And I said, Ma, that's all good and well, but I didn't see you rest growing up. You came home from your second job or your first job, you sat on the couch, and I would ask you to go somewhere. And you would say to yourself, talking to yourself, get up, get up, get up. You're not that tired. I'm going to not say my mom's name so that to respect her privacy, but she would be talking to herself, telling herself, you're not tired, just get up, get up. And so I saw my mom saying that to herself. And I subconsciously internalized that as it can be guilty. You should feel guilt for when you are trying to rest. So in my life, I've noticed that I go to the limit. I push myself to the limit before I burn out. And that's not healthy.
So, from what you're stating, that's pretty much learned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch other people do stuff and then you do those exact same things. And and yes, as you expressed, your mom felt, she was still trying to push herself when physically and mentally she could not. And the reason probably why she was trying to push herself, as you stated, is that she may feel guilty. And I do want to say that I think that if we start looking at that feeling of guilt in a different way, maybe that will help us as it relates to moving forward, because guilt is something that makes us feel uncomfortable. That does not mean that we shouldn't move forward with doing what we need to do, but by it make us feel uncomfortable, we can look at it as if it's a change. It's something that we're doing different, but it's something that we need to do. So I guess we need to look at that guilt in, okay, it's a change, it's something different, and this difference will help me become much healthier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And guilt is sometimes we don't recognize how guilt shows up, but guilt can show up in many different ways. But say that again. Sometimes guilt is just growth in motion.
Yes.
We're stepping out of what we've been taught and into what we need. So that
Yes.
mind shift of, instead of me internalizing and shaming myself for feeling guilty, let me internalize it and recognize it as, what, this is an opportunity to change.
Yes. And how does that make you feel as it relates to looking at it as a change, but also a positive change?
Mm-hmm.
So, what you're stating then, okay, let's welcome that emotion of guilt. But the way we're going to continue to welcome it is that we're going to look at it as something positive as it relates to change, and based upon this change, it will make us feel healthier.
Agreed, agreed. So we're not necessarily saying that, um, we're saying that the first step in order to self prioritization is really kind of reshaping the mindset of what it means to take care of yourself. That it's needed for survival and it's needed for continued growth. But if we look at it as a means of something that is earned only when you have exhausted all of your battery energy, um, after you only deserve it, after you have pushed yourself to the limit, you only deserve it because, or you don't deserve it because real people sacrifice. We want to change. We want to look at first working on how to look at that perspective differently so that then we can begin to embrace self care with open arms. So let's
Okay.
break that down. Oh, go ahead.
So basically, what you're saying now is we're looking at it in a different manner. I would say further, because now you're trying to prioritize what's best for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. So I know that we had mentioned that a little bit earlier about some signs that our body's battery is draining and getting low and that we need a recharge. But what are some other signs that our body is getting low, our energy is getting low and we need a recharge? One is if you feel resentful for doing things that you used to enjoy. Another thing is that you're emotionally numb and maybe you feel tense all the time. Um, when small tasks seem overwhelming, that could be a sign that things are becoming a little overwhelming and that maybe I need to take some time to myself or take some time to rejuvenate. It doesn't have to be by myself. It could be whatever you do to get energy. If you're constantly tired, again, no matter how much you sleep, you wake up tired, you go to sleep tired. When you do sleep, you're restless. When you do sleep, you got 50 things on your mind. Um, that's a sign that, hey, maybe we need to do a little bit more, pour a little bit more time into getting you rejuvenated.
Yeah, another thing is, you stop checking in on yourself.
Mm,
You can't remember the last time you asked yourself, how are you doing?
mhm,
So we
mhm.
have to be very intentional as it relates to stop putting out or refrain from putting out and put in and seeing how you're doing. Checking in on me.
Yes, yes. And sometimes that can be hard, especially if we haven't been taught to do it and we haven't learned how to do it. So some of these things that our body is showing, the fatigue, difficulty sleeping, maybe irritability, um, overuse of substances or addictions. And addiction doesn't have to be with alcohol or drugs, it can be overindulging in shopping, emotional eating, um, people pleasing. So providing excessive care to other people to the point where you keep saying yes and yes and yes and yes to other people, but then it begins to feel challenging to keep those plans that you've organized. So you just feel like your schedule is all over the place. You feel very disorganized. Those could be signs that, hey, maybe I need to look at rejuvenating myself because I'm not being able to show up for others like I want to.
Now, all that you express, all the things that we need to do to bring it back in, we're not expecting people or we're not expecting our audience to do all of that at once. We have to
Mhm.
start small, like really start small as it relates to reclaiming that space, reclaiming that peace that we're wanting, reclaiming, prioritizing things in our life. And so Sasha, what is one thing that we can do as it relates to reclaiming that space and also self-prioritization, self-prioritizing ourselves. What is something that you feel we need to do?
As a tongue twisters. For me, and something I'm constantly working on is setting boundaries for myself and work and setting boundaries for myself and with my friends. So saying, hey, I can't take that on today, or being adult enough and woman enough to say to my business partners or my colleagues, I don't have capacity to do that. Can you do that? Or how do we brainstorm this together instead of taking it all on and feeling like I have to do it? But I first had to recognize that that is one thing that I've struggled with for a very long time because I saw it growing up. I saw that my caregivers were like, especially the women in my family, you know what, never mind, I'll do it. Forget it, I'll do it. My mom, you know what, I'll do it. My grandmother, that's okay, I'll do it. No, let me do it, let me do it, let me do it. You're not going to do it right. So I've learned to say, don't even worry about it, I'll do it. No, no, because that's not sustainable long term.
So all that you express, yes, I'll do it. I'll take on the responsibility. And sometimes we feel that it is easier for us to take on the responsibility because we know that if we do it, then it would be done right, which that's a part of control. We're not even going to get into that. But that can be overwhelming. So what we need to do is we got to once again bring it all in and really scheduling time as it relates to things that make us feel happy, things that make us feel joyful and not feeling guilty. And some of those things are a walk, reading a book, music, something that feeds me without any return expectation.
Mhm.
I'm doing it for me, so I'm not looking for anyone else to return that favor or I have to invest in them in order to get back what I need. This is something I'm doing for me, like doing small things that helps reset or recharge my battery, as we discussed earlier regarding the cell phones.
Yeah. And whatever gives you energy. So for me, what gave me energy this weekend was hanging out at the park with my nephew. He was 3 and the pollen was buzzing, but he was laughing, running, and playing. And even though it wasn't just me by myself, his energy gave me the rejuvenation I needed. So it doesn't have to be by yourself, but it does have to be something that you enjoy. So for our listeners, we challenge you this week to give yourself permission. I want you to take 15 minutes each day to be with you. What does that feel like? What comes up? And I want you to write it down. It could be in your phone app or your notes app on your phone, but just take a minute to recognize what shows up for you. Is it discomfort? Is it irritability? That's okay, but just recognize it. So take 15 minutes to be with yourself.
And remember, it's okay to choose you because that is what we are wanting you to do in this season is to choose you without guilt. Self prioritize you and what makes you happy.
So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you next week for a powerful conversation on stress, caregiving, and what it's doing to our bodies behind the scenes. Until next time, take care of yourself so that we can all take care of each other. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Just Me Therapy podcast. If you are seeking further one-on-one diagnoses, interventions, and treatment plans, please consider scheduling an appointment with an individual counselor at Journeys Counseling Center, located in Greensboro, North Carolina. Journeys can be reached at 336-294-1349. The mission of Just Me Therapy podcast is to use authentic conversations to uplift one's mind, body, and soul. The goal of Just Me Therapy is to offer affordable education and insight to individuals who experience financial barriers to accessing individualized behavioral health care services. With that being said, the information, including opinions, advice, and recommendations discussed in this podcast, are intended for individual, informational, and educational purposes only. Such information is not intended to substitute the recommendations of your own licensed therapist or healthcare professional. Although we are licensed behavioral health professionals, we are not your licensed behavioral health professional. As a result, the advice mentioned on this podcast should not replace the recommendations offered by your own qualified health professional.